The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selena Mackenzie.
It is our Animal Day today, and we're going to be chatting now about political animals, the secret life of the political pets of Westminster and Washington. Welcome to the show, Peter Cardwell.
Hi, Selena. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, Peter. Now, I know that you're a broadcaster yourself, so is this your first book?
I have another book, actually. It's called The Secret Life of Special Advisors. And it's interesting because I've spent a lot of my life in journalism, some of my life, about 3.5 years being an advisor to the UK government. And part of that time, I got to know some of the political animals in and out of Westminster and Whitehall, and some in America as well.
Wow. Well, I think the most famous one we know of, isn't it, is Larry. Larry the cat.
Yes.
Now, apparently he's seen off 5 prime ministers, no less.
That's right. Keir Starmer in the UK is his 6th Prime Minister. And actually, with all the chopping and changing that has gone on in recent years in UK politics, Larry has been a real constant. In some ways, he's quite a British character. He's phlegmatic. He doesn't get too excited about things. He doesn't let things worry him too much. Even when he was nearly run over, actually, by Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, was on her way to the House of Commons, and her ministerial car nearly ran over Larry. And Keir Starmer, who I interviewed for the book, actually was in Canada at the time, and he said that his deputy sent him a message saying, with the clip of Larry and with the caption, "All going well here, boss."
Very good. Imagine a national treasure if she'd have run him over. How awful would that have been?
Wouldn't have been so good at all. No,
Not
I think
at
her
all.
popularity would have gained. Yeah,
it certainly would. So did Larry initially belong to a prime minister, or did he just invite himself in? Was he a stray?
Well, it's interesting. No, he was a rescue cat, and I'm a big rescue cat person. I have a rescue cat myself, Jack, who is currently lazing on the sofa near me. No, Larry was a very deliberate decision by Number 10 Downing Street to bring him in. And actually, the advisor behind the scenes, a woman called Liz Sugg, was heavily involved. And the reason they brought him in, there'd been cats historically, as I write about in the book, but there wasn't one at that stage. And she wanted to bring in a cat. And what had happened was on the BBC News the night before the decision was made, there'd been the image of a rat running across the doorstep of 10 Downing Street. And Liz told me she'd been trying for a while to convince people that they really needed a cat, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And then they gave Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, really good rescue shelter, a ring and said, "Would you like to help us out?" And funnily enough, the hundreds of thousands of pounds of free publicity was something that Battersea Dogs and Cats Home welcomed.
Oh, that's brilliant. I like that story. That's very good. And is Larry still there?
He's still there. He's happy. And actually, it's interesting because some of the prime ministers in recent years have brought in their own sort of family animals and so on. Some of them really didn't get on very well with Larry, including Dylan the dog, who is Boris Johnson's dog, really didn't get on well with him after they initially got off to a bad start. Dylan's snaffle some of the food that Larry had, and Boris Johnson talked to me about that as well and said it was something that Larry never really got over, and so the feud started. But actually Keir Starmer has 2 cats at the moment, but they're kept separate from Larry. Larry's old now, he's 18 years old, he's pretty territorial, and the 2 Starmer cats are kept in the sort of the flat that the Prime Minister and his family use, well away from Larry.
You can understand it, can't you? Because you're living a normal life like you with your cat, and I've got rescue dogs, and suddenly you become Prime Minister and you have to move into Number 10. You can't just leave your animals behind.
Well, that's right, actually. And I said to one of Keir Starmer's advisors, I said, look, it looks as if, this guy's going to win the election just over a year ago when his cat comes in, because I'd interviewed him previously and he said, oh, yes, the cat's coming with me. Don't worry. Couldn't do that to the kids. His initial cat, Jojo, as a rescue cat, was there. And then they subsequently got another little kitten, Prince the kitten. But he said, yes, the cat's coming in. And I said to the advisor, look, the family will obviously take a few days to move in to Downing Street. It'll take a while to get all their stuff in. And when the cat comes in, can you just let me know when the cat comes in? So this advisor behind the scenes very kindly sent me a WhatsApp and said, Jojo the cat is now in. I then tweeted it and said, exclusive, Jojo the cat joins Downing Street. And I got quite literally about 1.5 million sort of views on Twitter and responses from right around the world. And that was the moment where I thought, right, I've got to write a book about this, because there are just so many people who have interest, both the current animals and historically as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Do you go back in history then? We'll talk about America shortly, but in Tudor times, for example, in the UK?
Yeah, that's right, actually. So Cardinal Wolsey, who was the right-hand man of Henry VIII, had the first kind of really recorded cat person. And previously cats, of course, were a very... a lot of people associated them with witches and witchcraft and so on. But actually, Cardinal Wolsey's cat was the first real cat in UK politics to preside over and to keep a very close eye on what was happening. But they go back, of course, right throughout history, and even to Roman times, where Caligula threatened to make his horse a senator because he had such contempt for the senators. So animals have been around for a very long time. And yes, I do cover that. And from the American example, right from the very start of the Republic, George Washington had animals, and indeed every president has had an animal in the White House apart from two, one of which is the current incumbent, Donald Trump.
Yes, and you mentioned Dylan. Presumably there are other dogs in the book as well, not just cats and horses.
That's right. In fact, there are loads of dogs. There's a parrot. Churchill has a whole chapter to himself. Excuse me, he had a parrot. There are butterflies. There's a panda as well. There's panda diplomacy, of course. And indeed, the Kennedys had quite a lot of horses. And previously, when you had presidents in America, especially who were farmers, they often had horses on the land and so on. And indeed, John Quincy Adams, who was the 6th president of the United States, had an alligator very briefly in the White House for a couple of months, who lived in the bath. So there are some exotic animals as well.
Yeah. Crikey. Are Labradors quite popular dogs for politicians?
They are indeed, yes. And actually, Jeremy Hunt, the former Chancellor in the UK, talked to me for the book, and he said that he is quite a tight majority in his constituency, only about 500 or 600. And he said, putting out the pictures with the dogs, very, very important to him, because a number of people like dogs. Also, Nigel Farage, who may well be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, if the polls are to be believed anyway. He's the leader of Reform UK, of course. He has two dogs, and he said actually these days he really, as so many politicians told me actually, and have over the years, have said, you just want to keep your family out of politics. You don't want any photographs of your children and things like that these days because of social media and abuse, and essentially because they haven't chosen a political life, whereas their mother or father has. Cats and dogs, especially, and other animals, become a bit of a proxy for that. So you can have, a politician sort of humanizing themselves, ironically, with animals rather than with their kids, who may want to stay out of the media spotlight.
Do you think they possibly could clinch election campaigns then, the animals?
It's possible. I mean, I did some polling for the book. There's a big polling company called Delta Poll, and Larry, who we mentioned before, has 47% name recognition in the UK public, which I think many politicians would love to have. But certainly that you're likely, the polling indicates, to be more disposed towards politicians if they have an animal. And especially if you're older voters like politicians, particularly who have rescue animals. But it's one of the factors, one of many, many factors that people put into account. And I don't think too many people are going to say, right, you have a dog, therefore I'm going to vote for you. But it can factor into all the different things that we think about politicians, mostly negative, but some positive.
Yeah, it's true, because obviously the main reason to vote for somebody is their policies, but you do have to like the person, you do have to like their personality, and for me, if someone's a dog lover, then they're not too bad.
Well, this is it. And I spoke to a psychotherapist actually for the book as well. And she said, look, we make instant judgments about people all the time. And, if you're walking along and you see someone with a dog, you instantly think that person, if you're a dog person, that is, you instantly think they're a better person. I know as a big animal person, and particularly a cat person, I do kind of judge people a little bit. I probably shouldn't, but on their animals, and particularly, you said a moment ago, you've got rescue dogs, and that's made me like you even more, Selena. So, there are all sorts of ways that we evaluate people. So unsurprisingly, politicians want to get in on the act when it's a positive thing.
And vice versa with you liking rescue cats. So,
thank you.
Now, I've got here as well, I mean, I can understand alligators are a bit too far, but I can understand dogs and cats. But I've also got that you cover platypuses and lions.
Yes, these are both Churchill animals, actually. So
Wow.
during the Second World War, Churchill really wanted a platypus and wanted one sent from Australia. And he had a lion called Rota who was sent to him, and indeed an albino kangaroo, both of whom he donated to the London Zoo. And actually, Chartwell, where the Churchills lived, like many rich families after the Second World War, things got much more difficult with large homes, and servants and so on weren't in supply. And what he did was he gave Chartwell to the National Trust in the UK. And what happened there was that there were various stipulations, and one of them was that there was to be a cat called Jock who was going to remain there in perpetuity. And in fact, they're on the seventh incarnation of Jock, who's a ginger cat with white paws, who sleeps like his predecessors did on his master's bed.
Oh, bless. And was it fun writing the book, Peter? Because you mentioned you spoke to Sir Keir Starmer's advisors, but presumably you spoke to a lot of previous prime ministers, presidents, politicians.
Yeah, lots of politicians. 4 prime ministers took part, and quite a number of other politicians as well. So some of it's on the record, some of them have spoken about it before, and so on. And there's some really good, research out there. And I think it was just ripe for talking to people. And actually, it's a very different type of interview when you sit down with a politician to talk about something kind of personal and fun, aside from them having to remember, every single detail of policy. So sometimes in my other work, when I was doing interviews with Keir Starmer, for example, I spent sort of, however long we were allocated, 8 or 9 minutes on the main interview of the policy, and then sort of 3 or 4 minutes talking for the book as well. So that was just a very nice thing, and it was an easier and nicer way of doing things. But certainly it was a lovely thing to do, and I think you learn a bit more about politicians. Having worked in politics, I don't think they're all monsters. I don't think they're all dreadful people. Some of them are. Some of them are venal, out for themselves, arrogant people who don't really care about others. But some politicians do care, and I think it was interesting actually talking to Rishi Sunak, because he said, look, when you're prime minister and you say, I just want to go for a walk, people think that's a bit strange. You just think, why would you want to go for a walk? But if he said, I'm taking the dog out for a walk, people think that's a perfectly normal thing. And he said, you live in this very weird life where, you have police outriders and 24-hour security and planes and all the rest of it. And you're meeting presidents and prime ministers. But actually, there's nothing more humanizing than having to clean up after your dog, essentially.
That's very true. And we all have to do it. Yes. Presumably there's some lovely photos in there, are there?
There are indeed, actually. And what was lovely was a number of people who I interviewed gave me photographs, some behind the scenes ones as well. David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, gave me a lovely photo of him with Larry the cat on David Cameron's final day as Prime Minister. And that photo's never been published before. There were some people in Downing Street and various other parts of Whitehall as well. There's a lovely photograph of one of the cats at the Cabinet Office, the sort of central bit of government, who's called Ossie, and he's another rescue cat. And he was sitting on a top secret document, and this was taken in a sort of very, very secure piece of the Cabinet Office. And there's just a lovely photo of him sort of lazing around in this top secret document. So there are some nice photos. And the one actually from a number of years ago, about 20 years ago, longer actually, when the Clintons were in the White House. And it's of their cat Socks, who at one stage got more posts than Bill Clinton did, who's on the kind of press secretary's lectern and looking out to the press, and it's just this lovely photograph. So there's some really nice photos in there.
Yeah, I was just thinking it must be equally difficult for somebody who's sort of done 4 years or more in number 10, and then having to leave somebody like Larry the cat. You must get close to them, but of course you can't take Larry with you because he belongs there.
Well, you're absolutely right. On that advisor, I spoke about Liz Sugg. She's actually now a baroness, and she was a minister in the government, and she was a minister at the Foreign Office. And she resigned because the government made a decision she wasn't happy with. And when she was leaving, the Foreign Office is just directly beside Downing Street, and it's just the next building along. And as she was leaving, and she was quite emotional and got her box of belongings and so on, Larry actually came up and gave her a little hug, and she said it was almost as if he knew, kind of thing. No. But interestingly, whenever each administration changing in Downing Street, she has phoned in and said, look, if whoever the Prime Minister is wants to get rid of Larry, she would take him and he would retire. And that hasn't happened, but there have been a number of occasions when these sort of institutional animals have gone to live in other places. And there's a lovely story actually of Gladstone, the name of the of the Treasury cat, who didn't really like life in the offices. It didn't really suit him. And he went to live with a civil servant, and Palmerston in the Foreign Office, who enjoyed life but enjoyed it too much because he was eating too many of the treats that people gave him, and he was given a bit of a rest and sent away to the country to work off the pounds. And the permanent secretary, actually, Lord MacDonald, told me that people were often quite suspicious when he said, "Oh yes, the cat has gone to the country," but quite literally he had gone to the countryside with one of the civil servants. And then the senior civil servant was made governor of Bermuda, and the cat is so close to this guy Andy Murdoch, who is now the governor of Bermuda, that Palmerston has now gone to live in Bermuda and is in the governor's mansion in Bermuda, living a sort of third chapter in his life. So he's done very well.
Nice. Not a bad life in Bermuda, I would imagine.
That's right.
Well, it's right up my street. For our listeners, the book's called Political Animals, The Secret Life of the Political Pets of Westminster and Washington, and it's by Peter Cardwell, who we're talking to now. Peter, thank you so much for telling us just a bit about your book. Our listeners are going to need to buy it to find out more, but thank you for your time.
Thanks, Selena. Great to talk to you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.